Hey everyone, this is Hard Things episode 3 with your host Blaine Burgess. I'm excited today because I finally finished my website for my business, Infinite Strength. Just to remind you what I'll be doing, so the first arm of this business is the Hard Things podcast, which you're listening to presently. It's where I talk about hard things and different lessons I've learned in life. Second thing is Infinite Strength human performance coaching. So there's really no boundaries there. Whatever issues you're having in your life, whether it's physical fitness, emotional things going on, mental problems, or spiritual, I have collected a lot of information from, kind of all the best wisdom from, thousands of years of humanity. So ancient wisdom all the way up to modern wisdom. I think, I formed a bit of a system for myself over the last 10 years when trying to understand how to operate in the world and also how to operate in the world as it's rapidly evolving. So excited to start coaching people on that front. And the last piece of it is I do want to write a series of nonfiction books. So the first one's going to be called Initiative. It's about the story of how I lost 80 pounds after COVID, how I doubled my income from the beginning of COVID to this past year, 2023, and why none of that mattered. None of that made me happy at the end of the day. So that book, I'm really excited to dig into it, get writing. So that book is up for pre-sale on the website infinite-strength.com. There is a dash between the words infinite and strength. Make sure you do that. But the pre-sale is up. I'm also offering a pre-sale for all 3 books. So it's going to be the book Initiative, and then the second book, tentatively titled Ego Death, and the third one tentatively titled Bold as Love, like the old Jimi Hendrix song. So really excited again to get started on writing those. I anticipate writing about 1 per year, but the first one really is pretty simple and straightforward. Like all the ideas are in my head. It's just a matter of writing it. So my goal is to put it out in July 2024. So with that, if that sounds like something interesting to you, then head over to infinite-strength.com, hit the pre-sale. If you want to do human performance coaching with me, that's also up for sale, same place, infinitestrength.com with a dash in between the 2 words. And that's the closest thing you're going to get to an ad. I'm just excited because today's launch day. But again, on this podcast, no ads. It's one of the most frustrating things for me when I listen to other people's podcasts is to hear someone spout off about Athletic Greens. Sorry, Athletic Greens, not to, neg you in any way, but I'm sure it's a great product, but I'm sick of hearing about it. I'm not going to buy it. No offense. With that said, today, this is episode 3. The first one was 7 quotes for 7 years of weightlifting. Second one was my mission and value statement, kind of my 6 values. So now, today, this is going to be a podcast about the number 5. I'm trying to keep each week to a theme kind of regarding a number. And I will say I recorded the number 2 podcast, which will be number 6, released later in April. And that was with a guest, my buddy Danny Walter, who I mentioned in episode 1, got me started on weightlifting. We went super long. Interviewing is hard, especially when you know the person really well. You could talk for hours. So that's coming out later. But today, like I said, it's going to be about the number 5. And so that brings to mind, the saying, like, you're the average or the sum of the 5 people that you associate with most. I like that phrase, but that's really where it ends. Like, I think it's useful knowledge, but also I think this is a little bit deeper than that. So I go back to middle school in a book that I read called The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. It was good to go back to that. I also didn't realize there's a mini-series. It's April 3rd, 2024. There's a mini-series on Amazon Prime for free right now. and John Voight is the main character, Eddie. And there's a lot of great actors in it, like Michael Imperioli from The Sopranos plays a character. So, yeah, definitely check it out. If you are hearing this and you're like, oh yeah, I remember, or even if you don't, great movie. I will warn you, a lot of feels, so get the tissues if you're prone to crying, because it'll happen. So before I get into 5 people we meet in heaven, and then I'm actually going to add in an analysis of like the 5 people I think I would see in heaven after that. So that's, you have that to look forward to. But before I get into that, I'm going to read a quote from Deadpool, of all movies. So Ryan Reynolds' character is struggling, kind of stepping up and being a hero. And Colossus from the X-Men, he says, 4 or 5 moments is all it takes to become a hero. Everyone thinks it's a full-time job, but over a lifetime, there's only 4 or 5 moments that really matter. Moments when you're offered a choice to make a sacrifice, conquer a flaw, save a friend, spare an enemy. In those moments, everything else falls away. And when I was thinking about my 5 people, I really genuinely was able to break it down to 4 or 5 moments. And I'm sure all of my, potentially heroic moments have not gone by yet. But at least at age 33, these are the 5 that I really, kind of resonated with me when I went kind of inside and reflected on that. So, without any further ado, I'm going to talk about the lessons of the movie and the people that the main character Eddie meets in heaven. So Eddie is a maintenance man at a carnival, like a pier carnival. It's called Ruby Pier, and he feels like it's a stupid job. And every day he goes, he's super consistent. He always shows up for people, and that's really the main gist of Eddie. So I won't talk too much about him right now because I'm going to weave that into each one of the lessons. But the first person he sees is a carny called the Blue Man. So this guy, he had anxiety and he was prescribed silver nitrate to try and alleviate that. But silver nitrate, if you know anything about it, is toxic to the body. So it actually, at a certain dose, turned his skin blue. So he became kind of a carnival freak in a way. And I think this is a commentary on, race, dealing with people of different races, people that look different than you, people that have different characteristics, like, different genders or sexual orientations, or, you name it, socioeconomic backgrounds, different parts of the country, anyone who's different than you. I think the Blue Man kind of represents. So the lesson from this section was everything happens for a reason. Nothing and no one is unimportant because everything filters into a meeting, even if you don't understand it at the time. Or the word here is incomprehensible. So what Eddie didn't understand was the Blue Man was learning how to drive one day. He's driving in the street, and there was a kid ran out in front of his car to get a baseball that had been thrown, and the kid was Eddie. So the Blue Man swerved to miss him. Obviously didn't strike him with his car, didn't kill him, but then he did crash. And when he crashed, he got out of the car, had a heart attack. And because he was different looking, I think no one noticed. And he kind of died in the street alone. But he did this heroic thing where he saved the kid, saved Eddie, and then Eddie could go on and live and do all the things that he was supposed to do in his life. So that, I was kind of debating on whether I was going to talk about the people that I kind of resonated with either at the end or during. And I think I'm actually going to go back to the idea of doing it during. So to me, this was personified in my life by my brother, Andy. He's a half brother of mine. He's 21 years older from a previous marriage of my dad's. And so we have different mothers, and that's kind of how we're different. That's how, either he or I is blue, so to speak. And even though we are different, And I think maybe me growing up with my dad and my dad leaving when he was younger, I could see where he might have some anger about that, or be sad that he didn't get the experience I had. But no matter what, I think over the course of my life, I've just noticed his effort to overcome those feelings and treat me like a full brother. Even though I'm a half brother and I may have, um, you know, received more attention or had more time with our dad. So ultimately, yeah, I'm like super appreciative that he made that effort, and it definitely was not wasted on me for sure. So that's where that resonated with me. To keep it moving along, lesson number 2 came when so Eddie enlisted in World War II. So he was sent to the Philippines to fight the Japanese. And his second person is his captain, his commanding officer, played by Marco Imperioli from Sopranos in the movie. It was a good surprise for me because I really liked that actor. If you know White Lotus too, he's also in White Lotus season 2. But yeah, he and the captain are kind of thick as thieves. Even though it's his commanding officer, they're boys, and that is, that male camaraderie is something that's fun to have for sure. But eventually they become POWs, so they're in this prisoner camp with several other guys, and they just get abused by the Japanese. Several of them get killed, injured, maimed, all that, and it definitely takes a toll on them. They definitely get angry. Different things happen. And finally one day, the guard was juggling rocks, and Eddie, being from, carnival background, said, "Hey, Japanese soldier, I'd love to juggle those for you." Eventually, he got 4 or 5 rocks that he was juggling, and he used them to pass to his fellow prisoners, and they used them as weapons to escape. So they were able to break out based on his kind of ingenuity. But then that's when his grief kind of takes over and he goes crazy. So he grabs a flamethrower and he's torching all the huts in this little village where they were being held. And everyone's, they're just trying to get out of there. They're prisoners. They're like, hey, if we stay here, we're going to get captured again. Let's get out of here. And I think the captain just noticed that he had really lost it, that Eddie had lost it and was burning those huts. So the main thing that the captain did ultimately was, as Eddie was shooting these huts with the flames, he was trying to get him back, and ultimately he had to shoot him in the leg, and he tried to shoot him in the leg because he knew it wouldn't be fatal, but it would stop him, because at a certain point Eddie started to see an apparition in one of the huts, and he thought someone was in there, and he was trying to save him, but he was going to go in the hut and die himself. So the captain shot him, which ultimately ruined his leg. His leg was never the same again. He was limping. He couldn't play baseball. He couldn't dance. So he, that really plagued him his whole life. But it was because of his own grief and anger that had happened. And then ultimately too, the captain stepped on a landmine and got blown sky high. And it was a really sad scene, to be honest. And at that point, Eddie didn't even know that had happened because he was delirious, and his leg he was bleeding out. So the lesson there is that sacrifices are inevitable. They're a part of life. They aren't always about losing. Sometimes they're about gaining in a different way, but you shouldn't regret them. And this, in my life, was personified by my friend Tim Rawlings. So he's someone, when I moved to Austin, I was really looking for a community, and his gym, Raw Barbell, in South Austin, just happened to be 5 minutes from my place. And he, at the time, my goal was to do the clean and jerk movement, lift more weight. It's definitely was my weakness in terms of weightlifting. And he's a guy who had done 10 more kilos than me, 22 pounds more in the clean and jerk, and is kind of the perfect person to, he's a couple years older, a couple of kilos ahead, and a perfect person to learn from. And he became a really good friend and training partner. But in that time, also was probably partying a little too much. And through all of that, he was pretty patient and just encouraging. I'm like, hey, maybe don't drink. Of course, you don't listen, but definitely a good influence in my life. And I would say the shot to the leg really wasn't his intention, I don't think. But it really set like a great example in my mind. Definitely it was painful at the time, but there came a time when, he had a kid with, his longtime partner, and both their families are from Chicago. So they basically just decided they're going to move back to Chicago, pick up and move the gym all the way back to Illinois from Texas. And that's a huge undertaking, a huge sacrifice. So speaking of sacrifices, it was a huge one. And for me, it was like, man, we just got this, great training environment. I finally found an awesome training partner, and now he's leaving, and for me, I'm like, dang, you're gutted. It's a good friend of yours. And obviously we stayed in touch, but him leaving, although you understand why, it is a gut punch, in a way. So, for me though, just like being around him, really benefited me, even though he did have to leave. So again, like, sacrifices are inevitable, but they don't have to be, involved with regrets. And now, like 2 days from now, I'm going to Chicago to his gym to go train, and I've been fortunate enough to get up there about 3 or 4 times since he left. So it's not like we never train, never spoke again. We speak pretty much on a weekly basis, and I do get to train and see him every few months. So yeah. Anyways, Tim, if you're listening, thank you. Moving on to lesson 3. This is where kind of the parents come into play. So the woman that comes to him, his third person, is Ruby. That Ruby Pier, his workplace was named after. And she basically came to tell him a story of all the people who were hurt at Ruby Pier over the years. And this is directly inverse to his work, because he's a maintenance guy. He's trying to save people, and she was saying all the ways in which they couldn't save people from being hurt. And so growing up, Eddie's dad was pretty abusive, kind of an angry guy, drank a lot, and he had been to war as well. So he struggled with his anger, and Eddie definitely took the brunt of it, being kind of an older brother. His dad was really hard on him. So what he learns from Ruby is that his dad was actually, kind of had a light side that didn't come out much, but when it did, it came out in a big way. So there was a time when his war buddy, one of his good friends, was drunk. He came over for support. He needed some help, and Eddie's dad wasn't there. And being drunk, this gentleman in crisis decided to try to assault Eddie's mother. And in the miniseries, you see he thankfully doesn't get to finish his attack, because the dad comes in. But then, the friend runs out. He's drunk. He's, out of his mind in a crisis. And, the dad runs after him, and you kind of assume, he's going to go hunt this guy down and, deliver some justice. But ultimately what happens is the guy runs into the pier and jumps in the ocean, and Eddie's dad jumps in after him. And you kind of think, like, man, is he going to drown him? Like, what's going to happen? Ultimately, his dad saves him. So because it was his war buddy, he was super loyal. Even though he had just done this horrible thing, he sacrificed to go save this guy. And ultimately, he got pneumonia from jumping in the water, and he ended up passing away. So that kind of gave Eddie some perspective on his dad, and like, you know, again, it's like 4 or 5 moments in your life. That was a heroic moment for Eddie's dad, and um, you you just love to see it from a guy who maybe struggled in some other areas. And Eddie found a newfound appreciation for his dad. So the lesson there is, you know, forgiveness is important, not just for the other person, but for ourselves. You know, revenge doesn't do anything but fuel anger inside of you, and forgiveness is ultimately what relinquishes pain, and that's really, really important. So for me, the obvious thing would be, I think it's just my mom and dad. Um, so my dad always has, you know, been open and telling us that, you know, his father died when he was 3. His mom died when he was in college, you know, like 20 something, you know, early 20s. And so he didn't get very much time with his parents either, much like I mentioned with, you know, my brother not getting as much time with him as he wanted. So you can see where that cycle um, is self-perpetuating. But I think my mom has also shed more light on it, and just over the years been able to kind of help me understand, you know, where my dad's coming from. And um, he also is, you know, very successful, like National Wrestling Hall of Fame wrestling coach, which I did see, and I saw the way he coached me, the way he coached others, and he really gave selflessly. So kind of like jumping in after his buddy to save him, you know, I think everyone kind of has their own struggles, their own issues, their own trauma, and in any way that I maybe felt like, you know, he didn't show up for me, really didn't have anything for me, or didn't have anything to do with me, but more so just his own struggles. And, you know, when you can empathize with what happened, you know, I'm very fortunate to grow up with both parents in a house kind of filled with love. So, yeah, it just helps give me perspective, and also knowing my half brother, you know, gives me perspective for him too, of like what I got that he didn't. It makes me feel fortunate, and also just empathetic. You know, I can imagine how it would feel if I didn't get that. So, yeah, overall, great lesson. Lesson number 4. This person was Marguerite, was Eddie's wife. She met him at the pier before he went off to war, and basically waited for him during the war. When he came back and he was injured, you know, he was real angry about not being able to play sports or dance or anything, and she was really there for him, you know, and he ended up working maintenance at the park, so he didn't make much money, and she really, you know, again, she worked at the park too and supported him. And the big thing they came to realize with each other is you know, her regret was she didn't get to give him any children, but together at the park, they took care of kids all the time. So they did have that joy in their life, even if they weren't their own kids, it was still present. So they kind of came back together to understand that. And the lesson there is that the power of love, you know, beyond the immediacy of physical life, you know, doesn't falter with distance or death. You know, it's lives on in our memories. And so for me, I don't think, obviously I'm not married. I don't have a wife yet. But if I think of somebody who has always been there for me, and even when, you know, especially we were kids and teenagers, we maybe didn't get along as well, it would be my sister Christy. And you know, we're not married, but that's, you know, we're family. And you know, we obviously didn't have kids together because that's strange. And like, to me, that vibe is the same, because now, you know, her and her husband have had 2 kids. I had 4 nieces from my brother, and that's a beautiful thing for me to have. But I was 8 years old when I became an uncle, and ultimately, now I'm older and with perspective, you know, getting to be an uncle again. You know, my nephew's 2 and my niece is almost 6 months. You know, her kids are awesome, and it's kind of woken me up to this love of, you know, the future of these kids. I'm just excited for them to grow up. I love hanging out with them and, you know, kind of stooping down to their level. You know, like life for adults is so heavy and difficult. You know, that's why the podcast is called Hard Things. But when I play with my nephew Beckett, or I see little Hallie just being a baby, doing happy baby pose like she's a yogi, you know, it does give me so much joy. And my sister really gave me that, you know, through the through like getting married and having them and having her own family. So it is really a great joy for me. And I understand how Eddie felt about Marguerite. You know, even though it's not our kids together, you know, we get to take care of kids at the park. And yeah, it really just, and also, I mean, my nephew Beckett's kind of like my twin in a way. He looks a lot like me when I was a baby, and it just helped me kind of connect with my inner child, specifically, you know, even before Hallie was born. So yeah, shout out to Christy for starting to build a great family, and I look forward if you decide to have any more. So yeah, number 5 though is the last one. And it's pretty sad. So I'll start by saying that Eddie, in the story, he died basically knocking a little girl out of the way of a falling ride. So there's a big kind of metal thing that was breaking, and this little girl was just scared and standing under it, and you know, you kind of see the guillotine fall, so to speak, and then you see Eddie run, and you don't see what happens right away. So he gets to person number 5, and it's a small, you know, Filipino girl. So in World War II, when he was in the Philippines, you remember he went crazy when they left the prisoner of war compound, and he started burning all the huts. Well, he thought he saw someone in one of the huts, and it turns out that he did. This little girl, Tala, kind of in broken English, tells him, like, you know, you burned me. And he immediately has this visceral reaction, which I'm sure most people would. You know, you burn someone alive, that's awful. And I think that's a metaphor for what our anger can do to people that we love. And I think like a little girl like that naturally can receive love from a lot of people. And so she's kind of a stand-in for maybe a romantic partner or a close friend. And I'll say, in my own anger and, you know, grief and frustration and different emotions that I haven't handled well in my life, I've definitely hurt a lot of people. Either hurt them or distance myself from them, which in turn, you know, you don't get joy if you have distance. So the lesson from this one is, like, every life is purposeful, meaningful, and impactful. We live in a world where lives coalesce. We can't help it. We share our stories in more ways than we could ever know. And what he ultimately finds out is that the little girl that was underneath the ride guillotine monstrosity, he did push her out of the way and saved her. So he finished his life saving a little girl, which kind of balanced his karma in a way, because, you know, all those years ago he went crazy and burned those huts and with Tala inside. So basically they're seen together. You know, Tala forgives him, and he kind of gets his absolution, and that ultimately, meeting those 5 people kind of brings him into heaven. And I'll say, so all the people I've named so far were great, but I'll also say my most recent romantic partner, Ashley Murphy, you know, I was someone when I met her that I definitely have been healing, but I was still kind of on shaky ground. And even though, you know, I think when you start dating someone, you can see all the best qualities of them, and then as life happens, you know, some things come out that, you know, the dark side, the shadow kind of comes out. And, you know, the whole time I'll give her credit, you know, she wasn't necessarily, she might have been scared, but she didn't act like it. And she's still, you know, engaged with me on that level. And last year, kind of late last year, we separated. I just moved back to Ohio. I was starting school and was able to do it remote, and I had some family stuff going on. My grandma going into the nursing home, and I just decided I need to get some space, get some perspective, and we kept in touch at first, and then at a certain point there was just a breaking point, and we really separated and decided not to contact each other anymore. And that space that we had, after about 2 months, I really realized how angry I really am, or I have been, and how much that was affecting her, and not only her but other people, my other friends. Like I said, either directly or through me distancing myself, kind of almost in a way to isolate the anger from the world, which is also kind of a cool thing to know about myself. If I'm feeling that way, I do try to protect people, maybe not in the best way. I think the best way is to just deal with the anger. So thankfully, the past 2 or 3 months, I am moving back to Texas to go to school full time in Dallas, and I think I've been fortunate to have a chance to not only speak with her again, but share my findings, and try to make peace. I don't want my anger to continue to affect. So been able to apologize, kind of clear my own karma, maybe clear hers, and there's this last 2 or 3 months has been very, very productive in that way. So now I feel ready to go to school. Like I said, I'm going to chiropractic school, really, confronting my destiny. I think this is something that's always been on my radar, maybe subconsciously or unconsciously, and I'm just happy to, again, be able to, move forward. I think that's really all you need to do, is just release those old angry feelings, the grief, the sadness, and be able to move forward and ultimately, pursue a career where I can help people. I can be kind of Eddie in a way, have people come into my office and help them with their health issues. So with that said, I think that covers the 5 people we meet in heaven, covers the 5 people that kind of reminded me of. And so I think I'm going to sign off there. But again, my website, infinite-strength.com, is live. The podcast is very live. Obviously, this is episode 3, and I'm writing this book coming out in July 2024. So if you like the podcast so far, please consider supporting in any way you can. You can also, I think there's gift cards on infinitestrength.com. So gift card is kind of like a loan in a way. So if you just want to contribute, give that gift card to someone, keep it for yourself, whatever it may be. You can also hit me up if you need ideas. Again, I will accept. I think in the past I've been bad at accepting compliments and support. The people I've shared the podcast with so far have been giving me very positive feedback, but I also welcome any type of feedback, positive, negative, or otherwise. So thanks again for listening, and I think I will sign off by saying, once again, clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose. Thanks. See you next time.